Hello, I'm Ciarán Lynch and welcome to OviCast, the Teagasc Sheep podcast. Each episode will bring you the latest insights, advice and technical updates for the sheep industry. In this week's episode, we're joined by Sheep Better Farm Programme participant Eddie Gavin, his advisor Eoin Wolfe and Programme Manager Frank Campion. Farmer just outside Bagenalstown in County Carlow, Eddie runs a split flock. He describes the performance of daily lamb and ewes and how maintenance went for the mid-season flock. We move on to discuss his use of forage crops carry the ewe flocks during the winter months. Eddie describes what was sown and how he's managing grazing the different crops. With a good autumn, Eoin chats about how these crops have yielded locally this year and the levels of utilisation have been achieved during the early stages of grazing this season. Eddie explains how he plans to graze these crops post-lambing with the early ewes and how the multiples in the mid-season flock will be housed shortly after scanning, with only the singles and ewe lamb replacements remaining on those crops during February. Transition of these crops with ewes in late pregnancy can be tricky, and Frank explains potential risks and offers advice on how best to manage that nutritional change during that period of the year. Finally, we finish up with Eoin tackling the question of the possibility of using these crops to finish store lambs as opposed to wintering ewes. We start off, however, with Eddie giving us a bit of background to his farming system and the ewe flock that he's running.
There's about 320 ewes on roughly 100 acres of grass, and there's buy in roughly 30 calves a year, keeping till forward stores sold in the mart, might finish some of them, and around 100 acres of tillage.
So it's very much a mixed farm, Eddie. Like the ewe flock you're working with, what type of ewe have you in it at the moment?
Used to be kind of a Suffolk Boris type ewe, but we're after introducing a bit of Belcare the last couple of years there. Still bought a few Boris ewes this year, but a bit last year.
So that kind of stuff, you're moving that kind of stuff up Belcare across ewe?
Yeah. And we're putting Charlie rams. We were putting all Charlie, but now we're Belcare and Suffolk. We have 2 Belcares and 2 Suffolks now.
And that flock is split, so it is you're doing a portion yearly lamb the whole time?
Yeah, last year we had a good few culls and I thought they were in great condition, and I decided to put lamb them early, and I've done the same this year. We have 78 this year in lamb, or gone to the ram, and there's 68 in lamb.
And they're starting a lamb when roughly, Eddie?
About the 15th to 20th of January.
Okay. You went with a natural mate in them, so how long was the rams in with them for?
Exactly a month, 30 days. I left the ram with, and then when the others, I put the rams out with the others, then around the 8th of October, I stuck a little Charlie ram lamb, back in with the early ones, just in case there was a couple not tipped, and he marked a few there. I think he marked 4 or 5 ewes.
So a fairly good hit with them. What kind of scan had they?
When you take out the empties, there were 1.78 with what's in lamb. That's what the scan was on them, 1.78.
So that's that batch out of the way. I suppose the main bulky ewes then are coming in the mid-season. When are they due to lamb? March onwards?
1st of March, yeah. Okay. Scanning them the 5th of January now, coming up.
And you're not making new lambs?
No.
So just from a management point of view on the farm at the moment, like you have your grazing ground closed up, you have that bit of tillage, you have a bit of cover crops and catch crops going in for the winter.
Yeah, we always saw about, depends on what the way the fields work out, but we have 16 and 22, 38 acres of cover crops this year. And one field is Red Start and Gorilla, and the other field then is a bit of whatever was left in the drill, small bit of Gorilla, and the rest of it is stubble turnips. Okay.
And you've used that for the last couple of years?
We used to grow beet, and we used to always have beet tops. So when the beet went, it's only the last 4 or 5 years, 6 years maybe, they were growing the cover crops just for the outwinter the sheep.
And just like with those might be familiar, when did you start grazing that, Eddie?
Around the 10th of October there I let some of the ewes in on it there. The main bunch of ewes, the 240 ewes, was a field of grass right beside it, very strong, and I just let them into a corner of it. That's just for, I thought I had enough room, but they never went near it, to be honest. I barely picked that instead in the grass for it. And then I would have moved them onto the stubble turnips after the rams were finished with them, and I put the early ewes on the rape, the fodder rape, the red start.
And what kind of blocks are you giving them? Like, are you going 3-day blocks? Are you going with a week? Or
with the early ewes, and the weather was so good, I was giving them enough for a week. Every Sunday I used to move the fence, so I suppose I was giving them half an acre to 3/4 of an acre maybe for the week. And with the other ones, I was just giving them enough for. At the start, I gave them a couple of acres there, but I'm only moving it every second day now because they're going through the stubble terms fairly hard on me there this year. So I'm just giving them enough for a couple of days, just so to make sure to eat it. Because if they don't, they'll walk them into the ground like with the wet weather.
I suppose up to now, the one big advantage was you had 2 big benefits. You had good growing conditions and you had reasonably good grazing conditions as well. Utilisation would have been good enough up to the last week or 2. Yeah,
I gave the boat lots of bale of silage there, but the second bunch are eating it all right, but the early ewes are only picking at it. Kind of sorry I gave it to them.
They might be glad of it yet. Oh, and I'm just going to bring you in here at this point. Like, it's been a reasonably good back end for growth, particularly in grass conditions. Have the crops performed the same in that area?
Yeah, the fodder crops have been very good this year, Ciarán. Like, they'd be traditionally grown in the area where Eddie's from, there around, so in the southeast, and like a lot of the lads would be putting them in, might have their own bit of equipment and that, and there'd be farms that would have nearly all sheep and tillage farms. A lot of those lads grow them like Eddie. They would have traditionally been big growers, but we've been out and looking at a good few there on the ground, and this because of they got them in time. The likes of Eddie's there, where he grew those hybrid rapes, like they got in there the end of July, early August. There was a drop of rain then, so they got them up established, and there was great growth there all right through September into October, and continued on into November. And like when we measured a few, we were getting a 5 tons of dry matter per hectare, which would be exceptional. It'd be nearly one of the best years I've ever seen for them, And like Eddie was saying there as well, with the weather being so good, there was excellent grazing conditions for the lads who started grazing them there, because they're getting high utilisation out of them, and that that's a key thing, and the utilisation, because if the weather goes wrong and you won't get the value out of, you'll go through the area a lot quicker. So that's been good so far. Maybe it was a bit difficult there last week when we had the big storm, but other than that, it's been very good.
It can have a big impact, but you're looking at roughly somewhere between 0.5 ton and 1 ton ahead of previous years.
Yeah, I'd estimate that, Ciarán, and even because like Eddie was saying there, a lot of the lads kind of have two types of the fodder crops. There's a sort of that hybrid where you get the interval, the red start and gorilla, and they're usually sown after the winter crops, because they're sown for around just before the August bank holiday weekend, and they have a really high yield potential. And the other type then that are sown, usually they're sown sort of mid August, and sometimes they're sort of a mixture of fodder rape and leafy turnip, and some of the lads are sowing them because they're in the last scheme. They don't have as high yield potential, and but still they've all grown really well this year. And you go into fields and they're all well up over your knee, so that there is it's a good year on the fodder crops. Yeah.
It's one way definitely shorten winter. Eddie, might just come back to you for a moment. Like, what's your plan with these crops? When are the ewes going to come off? I suppose the earlies are the first ones that'll probably have to come off it for housing.
Yeah, I'd probably start giving them a touch of meal now soon, any day, and I'd probably bring them in over the Christmas, and I might let the ewe lambs onto that red start for just a couple of weeks. And I'll probably keep the rest of it then for when the ewes go out of the shed, the early ewes go out of the shed with the lambs. It worked well last year. Now, the lambs, you'd find it hard to see them in it, but they got used to it. They were all right.
So some of that's well dependent. Roughly, what age would you be putting them back out at, Eddie?
2 to 3 weeks, I think I put them on it last year. Now, last year I hadn't any of it grazed. This year I'll have half the field grazed, so it'll have room they'll have more room to run around. Like I'll be just moving the fence. Where last year, to get them going on it was slow because the field, like, they had nowhere to go. I had nowhere to put them, the trucks, for the sheep or anything, like, So this year has been better for them.
That's what I was just going to ask you. You were supplementing as well on the crop
Yeah,
last
I
year,
was
post turnout.
Yeah, I was giving them a bit. Yeah, just get the ewes to come to the truck, like, it's to see them as well, like, But I got very wet too there last year for a couple of days. Like, the wires stuck in the ditch there for a while, but they were okay. The ewes were in great condition, like, really too good.
There's a bit of an insurance policy with doing that as well. So there is, apart from the benefit for herding.
Yeah.
The mid-season ewes then, Eddie, what's the plan with them on the crops?
I say I'll bring them in a bit earlier this year. I'll say I'll have to. They're walking through the stuff fairly quick there now this year, and by the 20th of January I'll probably put them in. I might put in the doubles after scan. I didn't really see how many doubles I have first, but I say I'll be putting them in a lot earlier. I usually was around the 10th of February, but I think I'll be putting them in a bit earlier this year.
You have to get and wait and see what the numbers turn out like, but your ewes are excellent condition this year.
So I'll probably leave out the singles till near enough lambing. I'll put in the doubles and the triplets.
Frank, I might just bring you in at this point. Like, we talk a lot about transition onto these crops. What about transition off them? Is there a bit of a risk there, and is it something we don't maybe account for enough?
Yeah, it's a fair point, Ciarán. We get very head up about the transitioning on and having a run back area, or putting them onto it slowly so that they adapt to it. But it is just as important taking them off it that we give them that level of care as well. Particularly, you take Eddie's case here now. He's taking them off when they're in late pregnancy. They're in those final few weeks before lambing, and we know that's kind of when ewes are at their most sensitive in terms of their nutrition. So we need to adapt them off it slowly, and part of that comes into some of the management things that Eddie's already touched on. So certainly what we don't want, and it's the same for ewes coming off crops as in anything, we don't want a sudden change in diet in that kind of last month or so. We want to, if we have to change the diet, we want it to be gradual. So before they come off the crops, they do need a bale of silage out with them. They do need to be already getting their meal that they're going to be getting when they go into the shed, so that when they do come into the shed then and they're only getting the forage, be it silage or hay or straw, and they're getting the concentrates, that they've already had some of that in the diet, so that it's not a complete dietary change. They're just losing some of the forage crops out of it. And I suppose the big thing with that too is that as we're getting the build up to lambing, I suppose the temptation is, well, we're getting good nutrition out of forage crops, we might cut back on the meal slightly, and that's fine, but we then can't suddenly throw the ewes onto a very high level of meal in the shed. They need to be built up slowly again, and we need to account for that when we're taking them off the crops as well, that we do that correctly, that we don't lead to acidosis. And look, Ciarán, we've seen over the years, myself and yourself and the other lads, with through the Better Farm Programme and different things, that these crops and all work exceedingly well, but if we don't get the adaptation right, any upset or major dietary change in those last weeks before lambing can cause a lot of problems. It can lead to increases in all the things we really don't want to see in the lambing shed, be it twin lamb disease, milk fever, increase in prolap cases. So in order to keep them to a minimum, we need to get the adaptation coming off the crop right.
So in Eddie's case, bringing the twins and the triplets, the higher risk ones in earlier, is probably a more sensible option.
Exactly, and he'll be able to keep his singles out longer. They're going to be getting lower levels of meal anyway, so it'll be easier to adapt them off the crop. And as you said, those higher risk triplets and twins, bringing them in first is the sensible option. Particularly your triplets and your quads, they're going to be your most, I suppose, sensitive to a dietary change. They're the ones most under a nutritional pressure for the last few weeks before lambing, so they should be the first off it.
And maybe going to throw this one as open to any of the three is the one answer, but is there a potential there on farms like Eddie's, maybe Eddie's in particular, for finishing store lambs on some of these crops, maybe looking at that option of housing ewes earlier on your typical silage diet and using that crop to finish off lambs?
I'd say they would, Ciarán, but I think it want to be on a planned basis. So that you'd want to be happy enough that you have your housing set up and that you're not going to cause a problem in the shed, and that you're doing everything that Frank is saying with the transition right. I suppose one of the benefits I see out there with the fodder crops where lads are using the ewes, that is a good way of saving up grass for the springtime. So you definitely wouldn't want to be sacrificing the grass that you saved up for the springtime. The other thing is, I suppose, from a management point of view, you want to have, like Eddie has very good fencing in his field, and you want to have fencing in the field with the fodder crop that you can manage it. And I mean, there is definitely a benefit in the following tillage crops where you recycle back the manure from the sheep back into the ground, and that with if we can maintain the sheep prices at the higher rates, that there is money in it for both parties now for the store lands, and that there would be an opportunity for some people, but it's about getting those bits of detail right, that they can manage the ewes and the store lands together correctly.
Eddie, you're going to have a couple of weeks of reprieve before Hull gets busy in your farm, but it's great hearing a bit more about your system and what's happening on the farm. I'm sure it's something we're going to have more updates on in the coming months and years as part of the Better Farm programme. But look, really appreciate your time, the three of you today. It was great having you on and great getting an insight to that system.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ciarán.
Thanks, Ciarán.
We're going to finish the episode up at this point. You can keep track of Eddie's performance and that of the other Better Farm participants in the Teagasc Sheep newsletter that comes out each month. It's also available on the Teagasc website and on the Better Farm page under the sheep section of the Teagasc website. That's it for me for this episode. Again, for any updates from the sheep programme, keep an eye on our Twitter page at Teagasc Sheep. I'm Ciarán Lynch. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe and listen in to any of our episodes.